welcome to my chat about the Gates of Antares Taking of Taskarr day that was at Warlord on Saturday. I took Rebel Gar, I enjoyed it. I played 3 scenarios, I think all from the new book. They're all interesting in their own ways, they all provided variety and different ways of playing. I did see Virai, I did see Gar Exiles, and I did see Privateer forces being played. They all had various results. Gar Exiles, I think, combined the strengths of Standard Gar with some of the strengths of Rebels. So they do put more of an emphasis on outcasts with lugger guns, which I think are probably the strongest unit per point in the Gar list and the Gar Rebels list. I've got 2 units in my Gar Rebels who always do really well, and they're literally the cheapest infantry units I've got that aren't the weapons teams, and they do just machine gun things to bits. I'd love to run 36 outcasts in 3 units of 12, which would not be that expensive in points in my armies at some point, and see just how brutal they are. I've taken down Gar Empire command crawlers before using lugger guns. Just the sheer number of dice you're rolling, if you get lucky, you're going to wipe something out. But back to some of the developments from the day. So Taking of Taskarr isn't out just yet, but will be out soon. It includes 3 new armies, one of which is completely new, which is the Virai, who are an AI that are a little like the replicators from Stargate, but also very different. They are a self-replicating AI race that are virus-like in some ways, who the rest of the pan-human races have tried to exterminate whenever they come across them, because they can cause them problems. You've got the Gar Exiles, who are Gar who are still, on paper at least, loyal to the Empire, but have fallen out of favour due to internal politicking. And you've got Privateers, who are pirates. They've got letters of marque, they're very official. They might not be dry yet, but they're very official. And what they are is, it lets you combine Algarin, it lets you combine Freeborn, it lets you combine Boromites in one force. You will not get the special units that those forces get, but it will let you mix and match some of the infantry. So suddenly you're using Algarin troopers alongside Freeborn troopers alongside Boromite gang fighter type things. It'll also give you a home for mercenary units that you just want to slot in. And Tim and Rick talk about introducing more mercenary units. In the cabinet there was another mercenary unit being displayed. There were the original mercenary characters when Antares first launched, so I'm trying to remember the names of them. But you've since had Hruk, I have no idea if that's the correct pronunciation, come out, and the limited figure that they did with the Antares dice game, who's another mercenary. It does open up the possibility of seeing an entirely mercenary army that you've put together from hodgepodges of units, or having a privateer force and having some freeborn and some Boromites and some mercenaries. So that's going to be interesting, particularly for people who want to have very diverse collections. So 3 new factions, one of which is completely new and 2 of which are different ways of doing your existing army. And it's got rules for shipboard combat, and it's got rules for doing a variety of different things. It's a very big supplement in terms of rules and in terms of content from what we've been told. But what I found most interesting was the seminar. So Rick and Tim talked about a variety of things, one of which being there's the possibility of a 2nd edition of Antares in a couple of years. So Antares has been out a couple of years now. Some of us will have got the big fat rulebook that is very reminiscent of Rogue Trader when it first came out, and that was in the big starter set. There's a smaller rulebook that you can get now without the army lists in, without the large amount of background in. that comes with the £35 starter, which is very accessible to people new to the game. And the big box set started with Gar and Concord. You had about 800 points of Concord and 400 points of Gar. But because Gar break a lot of rules for how an infantry force works in Antares, because essentially they're little squadrons of tanks, people at first really struggled with Gar. They don't now, because they've realised the weaknesses that Gar have. They can't benefit from cover. They struggle winkling other things out of cover unless they switch to their artillery when they're suddenly rolling far fewer dice. They are numerically, if you're going to go in big on suits, quite a small army. You're paying 60 points a suit. You're paying much less for your Concord troopers, you're paying even less for your Algerine troopers. And they're vulnerable to being pinned out by things like net ammo on X launchers and things like that. So Gar were very intimidating when people first started the game, but that's a solved problem now. People are beating them regularly. But there was a lot of talk about the future of Antares. So what a second edition might look like, that it wouldn't be a reimagining of Antares, it wouldn't be the sort of difference between second and third edition 40k or 7th and 8th edition 40k. It would be much more of a streamlining, because Rick is aware that there's a bunch of stuff in the rulebook that people don't use, and that some of the advanced rules that he wove into the basic rules, again, people find them a bit confusing. He's written some other rule sets that are reasonably similar since then, Fantares being one of them, and I know I wanted to do some battle reports on it, but I didn't have the facilities or the painted armies. That will change in the near future. So Rick's gone back to the system and looked at how to develop it. And I've seen some of the things he's looked at and the developments that he might make, and they're very interesting. So a quicker paced Antares, less flicking through the rulebook, the potential of getting the rules down in a little booklet. But there was also some talk about how to develop the player base. So a lot of people have got some Antares stuff, but at the moment people are going, oh, there's nobody who plays Antares near me. There's only 3 or 4 people at my club who've got Antares stuff and they don't bring it. Very often because nobody's asked them if they want to bring it along. But we talked about different ways of encouraging participation. So, tournaments. Antares is very much a narrative game. It's focused around the missions, it's focused around the things that you can do to theme a force together. It's whether tournament play and encouraging tournament events would be a really good way of pushing Antares. And like the wider wargaming community, there's a big split on that, because tournaments encourage a certain way of play, and as somebody who's played 40k, the meta for 40k, particularly in 7th, put a lot of people off. The notion that if you don't take the most efficient force, there's a combination using the Allies matrix of a bunch of different armies to take the best units of each and the best formations. If you don't do that, you're wasting your time, and your money and your collection is a total waste of time, totally worthless. Don't even bother turning up to games because you've lost in the buy army phase. That's something that people are very aware of and want to avoid, for really obvious reasons. But would an organised play format that is reasonably quick to play, that has a certain defined missions that are very balanced, be something that would encourage people to play Antares? I think the answer to that is probably yes. I've played most of the rulebook missions and a bunch of the missions from the supplements, and some of them are very one-sided and imbalanced. And they're meant to be that way, because it's a narrative game. It's not necessarily about crushing your opponent, It's about meeting other criteria. So, is organised play and an organised play pack from Warlord going to be a good idea? I know that if I want to play a bolt action tournament style game, I just need to ask. Because bolt action tournaments are reasonably common, and there are always people out there looking to practice their tournament army. I know that there's a critical mass of bolt action players out there. If I've got a 500 point force, then I can get a game really easily because people have got 500 point forces ready, painted to go in a box to bring to the club. If I wanted to do a narrative bolt action campaign around something, that might be a harder sell because it means you need to commit more time. And I think Antares is sort of in that area sometimes. People are like, well, there's not tournament events generally coming up for it, so I'm not practicing for anything. There's nothing focusing my attention on getting that done. So Warlord do the Antares days, there's Antares boot camp, there's various Antares events that go on around the country, but very often they're about introducing people to the narrative gaming, they're about getting people into the game itself. They're not incredibly competitive, because I think a lot of the people at the core of Antares are narrative gamers who are about Rick's rule, that you're there to have fun, which is not necessarily something that the tournament players always adhere to. So, whether an organised play pack would be a good idea was one point. An Antares kill team or special forces game where you've got to paint up 10 models and that's your whole force and that's less of a commitment in preparation and time was another thing that came up, and I think that's certainly got some potential as something that would help people get into the game, help people play it, get people playing more often. A sort of quick play 10-man game which is very narrative based, very much around certain missions, could be a lot of fun. You could fit it into normal Antares campaigns, you could do a variety of things with it. Playing with cut down units has been mentioned, so you can get little quick games out of the way really quickly, so 3-man units for standard infantry instead of 5 or 6, stuff like that. But Antares is something that Warlord are continuing to put resources into. Again, the Vol were discussed for next year with plastics. So there's 4 Antares armies with plastics at the moment. Gar have got 3 different sprues. They've got the assault suits, the battle suits and the bombardment suits. You've got Concord with the basic infantry and the medium combat drone on one sprue, plus the transport plus the tank. You've got Algorine with basic infantry. You've got Freeborn with basic infantry and access to the Concord tanks. So there's enough stuff out there with plastics that's easy and cheap to pick up a starter army for. The starter armies are 45-50 quid for a good 800 point force for 4 of the factions, which gives you a jumping off point to develop that critical mass of players. The question is then, how does it get done? And I think greater community engagement and more things happening, whether it's online or in real life, is going to give players more confidence to engage. I think there's not really an awful lot of Antares YouTube content out there that's recently made. I think that some of the Antares events are not that well advertised. I think it's largely a marketing problem, and again that got touched on with the seminar. So I think there will be a change in how Antares is marketed. That's already started happening with the Nexus on the Warlord site. So there's much more content being generated. The people generating YouTube videos, so Rocky's War Room being one of them, are getting pushed by Warlord to get more views, to get people getting more eyes on Antares figures, getting more eyes on Antares games. I think it's not got that many bat reps online, that are reasonably recent, and I think it could probably benefit from some sort of let's play style videos where they go through exactly how to play Antares and how the core mechanics work. Because for people getting into it, you provide that sort of resource and they find it much easier to work out what's going on. When I was looking at getting into the Batman stroke DC miniatures game, I watched some battle reports on some of the big YouTube channels to see how it worked. Unfortunately, Night Miniatures stopped doing the Marvel range because those are the original battle reports I looked at, and I really liked them, and I'd love to have collected the models, but then bang, cancelled. But that's not happening with Antares. Antares is for the long haul. Warlord have put a lot of money into it, Warlord have put a lot of faith in it, and they are selling stuff. But there's a lot of people who are building up collections and coming to events, but not necessarily playing a lot of games locally. And I think sort of community engagement and confidence building and giving people the tools to do that through organised play, through smaller intro versions of the game like Kill Team, would help develop the Antares player base significantly and give the game a bigger reach. It is a really good game. It is a game that has some very good mechanics. It is a game that is enjoyable to play and makes sense and is very well suited for narrative gaming, but I could see with the right support being a competitive game that isn't very gimmicky. But yeah, that's my impressions coming off the Antares day at Warlord on the 26th of May. I saw the miniatures coming out for the next few months. Really nice, really nice, and picked up a few. But I think my next army is probably going to be Privateers, because my Rebel Gar, I've taken them to 1, 2, 3 events now, I think, and they've absolutely murdered the opposition, and I probably made a mistake thinking they'd be the plucky underdogs when people are like, oh no, not the Rebel Gar. So I'll develop and paint up my Privateers, I think. I've got some Freeborn, got some Algarin, got the new Privateer character pack, put them all together and I'll easily have 1,000 points. But Warlord are continuing to give people ways of theming their armies. So Privateers and Exiles gives you themes for your Algarin, your Boromites, your Freeborn and your Gar. I imagine there'll be new units for Concord in there. There'll be new units for Isaurians in there. Certainly we saw some new Isaurians, some new Concord Skulls. There's new stuff coming out for all the armies to give all of them new units, new ways of playing, new ways of theming your army and loosening up how army selection works. So Warlord are not going to be invalidating the miniatures. They'll be giving every army more support. They're doing a supplement a year, and the supplements have really started pushing and expanding on the rules and giving you more tools to do more things, though it is particularly to play narrative games, and the emphasis has been on that. I think we may see a little bit more done for competitive players. We'll certainly see more miniatures releases for the next 6 months, and we'll see, hopefully, some more events organised and more online engagement and more marketing. Warlord have hired somebody for their community management and online engagement, and it'll be very interesting to see what they do because video will be a big part of it. But yeah, that's the news and my thoughts following the Warlord Antares Day. If you've got a strong opinion, leave a comment below. If it's about the Warlord games, email them directly or put it on the Facebook group or something like that. If you put it below and I think it's a good idea, I will pass it on to Warlord. But yeah, if you've liked this video, hit like or subscribe. If you feel strongly, leave a comment below. Otherwise guys, good gaming.